Hello, and welcome to another Sacred Wisdom podcast with your hosts, Chris Clifford and me, Becky Parks. Today, I'd love to welcome Magenta Pixie and her husband, Daniel. So Magenta Pixie lives in the New Forest in the UK, and she is the author of 5 best-selling spiritual books. Magenta is a channel for the higher dimensional divine intelligence known as the White-Winged Collective Consciousness of Nine. The transmissions she receives from the Nine have reached thousands of people worldwide via the extensive video collection on her YouTube channel. Magenta has worked with people from all over the world as an intuitive consultant and consciousness coach. Her book, Masters of the Matrix, was selected as a Book Authority winner in the categories Best Spirituality Books of All Time and Best Consciousness Books of All Time. Daniel, also known as Cat's Magic, is Magenta Pixie's husband, video editor and book proofreader. He has been working with Magenta since she began her YouTube channel back in 2008, behind the scenes for many years, providing the visual montages that accompany many of Magenta's videos. He has also worked as an actor. In more recent times, Daniel has made video appearances mainly on Magenta's Telegram channel, often providing a light-hearted and whimsical take on contemporary spirituality. He does, however, have a deep and profound respect for all spiritual traditions. Daniel is particularly interested in mystical Christianity and Gnosticism. And over to Chris.
Thank you, Becky, and welcome, Magenta and Daniel. Thank you for joining us today. And also, I'd like to say hello and welcome to all of our listeners. So today, 2 of the topics we want to talk about are spirituality and religion, with a focus on Christianity, which is Daniel's expertise. On the surface, these might feel like 2 very different topics, but they may be more closely aligned than what we think. So our guests today, Magenta and Daniel, have discovered this firsthand through the work that they do together and separately. So I'd like to hand over to Magenta for your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Becky. Thank you for asking us to join you today. Really, really lovely to be here. I think for me personally, over the years, when I was first waking up spiritually, I was very much looking for my niche, looking for my place. I'm thinking, oh, I must be New Age because I do this and I feel this or I see this. But then I would read some of this New Age material and think, well, I'm not sure as I do resonate with that. And then I'd find perhaps Buddhism or Hinduism, and I think, oh, that's me. You know, and I did follow a Hindu path for a while in my early spiritual awakening. I went to satsangs. It was really beautiful. Then I discovered paganism and I thought, oh, this is me. And I connected with all these people who are, you know, Wiccans and all these different traditions in the pagan community. And that was great fun. And over time, I learned that for me, the way I see this now is that these are expressions of an individual, just like your clothing, your jewelry, your ornaments in your house, the artwork you like, the music you like. It's an expression of your inner philosophy and your belief and your spirituality. But because I began to, if you will, channel, or rather what I did was presented as channeling, and I believed it to be channeling at the time when I began. I believed I was speaking to a spirit guide or to angels that were outside of me on some other plane, in some other dimension, on some other planet. In those early days, I took the stance of being, if you will, New Age, because that's where I believed at the time, you know, channeling comes from. But over time, I have realized that we are all doing the same thing, whatever we want to call it. And my material comes from that higher place, if you will, that place that is outside of my own conscious awareness, whatever name you want to give to that. And the information that comes through uses or rather my translation of it, and the clairaudience I have when I listen to that stream of consciousness coming in, the words used, the terminology is very new age, if you will, and the action of channeling is new age. So I now would happily accept that label, take that stance, because it shows people what I do. But does it really reflect me and who I am? And I would say no, because my own personal self is an eclectic mix of a multitude of labels, and I can see myself and my philosophies within a whole myriad of different philosophical and spiritual presentations. So I feel whilst labels are useful in one respect, I wouldn't want to discount them because we use them for communication. On another way of looking at that, labels can be distracting and can also misrepresent you and what you do. So whilst there's a place for labels, there's also a place to have no label. So that's kind of where I am now, really. If I meet someone who doesn't know anything about me and they asked me, you know, what belief system do you hold? What's your religion? What's your spiritual label? Then I would say it's kind of a mix between, if you will, sort of modern spirituality as in new age, but it's more esoteric, ancient wisdom with a bit of Eastern mysticism thrown in and a little bit of Christianity there as well. I'm very eclectic is probably what I would say, without getting into too much of a discussion and losing people. But people who know my work would be aware of this, as I talk about this quite a lot. So that's kind of where I am with it, really.
Thank you, Magenta. I'd just love to dive in here. Like you, I've gone on a long spiritual journey, and part of that absolutely does explore aspects of what we call New Age and what was presented to us as New Age. And I know that that title has been almost vilified, and people, some people like to sort of dismiss it as being something that is not authentic. But for me, when I'm picking apart all the different things that we might think of as New Age, for me, it always goes back to ancient sacred wisdom from all around the world. And that's what, if you sort of go into a deeper dive, that's what I'm really fascinated in, is how spirituality developed all around the world, and how different cultures interpreted their connection with the divine self and the connection with all that is, and each other and the earth. And as part of that, you can explore things like, crystals, that people would say, oh, that's very New Age. Well, if people understand that crystals have energy, they resonate at different frequencies, they can be used as tools to heal. It's fascinating when you really go into that. Or different forms of healing. So yeah, I can resonate with that. There's lots I could talk about regarding New Age, but it does draw on religions as well. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Am I unmuted? Am I unmuted now? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm still learning Zoom, so I noticed that everybody else muted when the other person was talking. So I apologize. I'm just getting used to this. I love what you said, Becky, there about putting a label on different traditions, like more recently as New Age, and it becoming a slur term. To me, that is just bizarre, and I've tried to get my head around why certain people do this, because it is we were talking about this last night, Magenta and I think it's humans. When humans take any spiritual concept, they have a need to try to understand it and categorize it. And this is what has happened with every spiritual tradition forever. a certain kind of group of people will come along and they want to quantify it, they want to legislate it, they want to ration it, and before you know it, you've got a dogmatic religion which on one hand is successful in getting a message out, but on the other it gets people into really weird ways of thinking and the whole hierarchy. And it's such a shame, because the source material and the divine experiences that many human beings have had since time began on all parts of the earth, once it gets into the hands of people who try to study it and intellectualize it, it's I guess it's, you know, you can look at it philosophically, it's a refinement process overall, what we're doing with this material. But I think it is a weird trap that we all get into, and it's happening right up into the present with the current kind of contempt towards what certain people, you know, they term it as New Age. It's because they are, again, maybe from a good place initially, they're trying to understand it and maybe warn people or guide people in the right direction. But once again, I just see it as an example of how these good-hearted people started out well, then they've become cynical, they've had a bad experience, and they've like, we need to regulate spirituality. And when you do that and you shut down conversations and you're mean to people and you say, this is right, this is wrong, that's, you know, Satan inspired, stay away from this, this is the only regulated thing. Before you know it, you're wondering, like, what have we learned as humans beings? People, you look back at your history books and see, oh, the religious persecutions of this time period. We can fall back into that trap so easily as people. If we close things down, we start to say, these ideas are set, this is right, this is wrong. So I like what you said there, Becky. It's everything dovetails into one another when it comes to spiritual traditions. This is why people have been given insight all over the world in different times and locations. It's for us to all put it together and not necessarily figure it out, but share notes and enjoy the journey. Don't take it, right, you've had this mystical experience, we'll write this down, and then we get a committee together and we need to design some kind of you know, regimented worship. Like, worship has become such a weird thing as well. It's become mechanical and also almost like you know, you need to supplicate yourself. Is that the right word? Supplicate, make yourself lesser than, you're not worthy. And that's never been my vibe. I see all of these emanations and messages from the universe as things to build us up and empower us and help us figure out, you know, our neuroses and stuff. It's not about you're a worm and you haven't got the hope of making it to some other mystical paradise unless you do A, B, and C and D forever. And I think this is what is happening bizarrely in more contemporary times, because it's whereas you look back in sort of like the more hectic parts of the medieval period, when it's all about sin, original sin, and not making it to heaven and falling short of the mark, and just you know, everybody's not worthy. It's almost becoming like that, and it's a shame recently, because it's like there's so many conditions that certain people are presenting, which are conditions of your, you know, ascension, conditions of your spiritual growth. If you do this, you've blown it. If you're doing that, you're way off the mark. And so, like I said, I'm not really sad about it anymore. I'm slightly disappointed, because I thought well, I suppose every human who lives likes to think that they're in a more enlightened time, but I think the last 2 years in particular, 2-3 years in particular, have kind of highlighted the fact that in many ways we are at our complete infancy in terms of understanding medicine, the human body, and spirituality, because so much is going weird. But that's not to say that I'm discouraged, because this is another thing. Lots of people say, oh, when is the truth going to be revealed? You know, when are we going to learn the truth about our existence? To be honest, since I began like particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, really taking the time to find certain books and teachers. It's been there this whole time. If people want all of it presented to them on a plate, like this is the truth, in one article of 500 words, they're going to be disappointed. You're not going to find that. And to be honest, your personal journey towards truth, I've got a stack of books here. I might or might not show them to you if the conversation goes that way. But like everybody's journey is personal when it comes to uncovering the different layers and the beautiful personal messages that can come to you from books written maybe 100, 600 years ago. And it's incredible. I wouldn't want someone to present me with just like a one page, this is the truth, this is what's going to be revealed to you, this is the wisdom that's been hidden from you as a human all this time. It's been there all this time. It's been in these books for 500, 600 years. But if you don't take the time to jump in and enjoy it, it's like somebody telling you, like, there's this beautiful sacred pool in the forest just outside of your back garden. And like, you can read about it, you've heard about it, but then you can't complain, oh, it's not accessible to me. It's like, all you have to do is just walk down the path and take a dip in the sacred pool. It's the same with all these books. People are so hectic about, when is the truth going to be revealed? It's there, and it's been there this whole time. I believe anyway. So that's my opening statement.
Wow, thank you, Daniel. There was a lot there, but you reminded me of, I believe it's an old Hindu proverb, I think Chris can correct me, where it says that there are hundreds of paths to the top of the mountain, and it's all about the individual journey. We can all find our own path to God, to source, to our higher self, to the inner truth, which is there, which is available if we look. But the one path that's not very helpful is the person who's running around the mountain telling other people that their paths are the wrong path. You're not going to get anywhere if you're going to run round and round rings around the mountain telling people not to get there. And that's so true. So yeah, thank you for that. And I believe you as well. The truth is not only there in sacred texts, it's there within ourselves, it's there reflected in other people, and we need to take the time to find it. So thank you. Chris?
Okay, thank you. And this has been a great conversation, and I agree with what all of you have said about both labels, and then Daniel about it. Anytime something gets organized, then it feels like the humanness in us as a collective want to put a bunch of rules around it and say, well, if you're a part of this, this is what you have to think. And so, Magenta, I agree 100% with you that labels can be useful, especially like for the kind of work that you're doing, because people look and they want to say, well, is this something that I'm interested in? I need some kind of context for it. But outside of that, I also agree, you said they can be very distracting. And so recently I've tried, when people ask, well, what kind of religion are you? I say, well, I prefer not to put a label on it. And no one likes that answer, except for me. I think it's an awesome answer because, I was raised one way. I've studied a variety of different religions. And, there's pieces of all of it that resonate. And there's pieces of all of it that are very, very common to each other. There's all these wars and fighting over, this is my God and this is, our way versus another way. And there's really a lot more commonality between all of it than what one may think. So when I could get away with that, my answer is I don't want to put a label on it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think labels are, as I said earlier, useful, but can be distracting. And I think also an important point is to be aware that there is a difference between truth and the way that it's accessed as in an absolute or a philosophy. And that's a difficult one to kind of get your head around, because one is in a philosophical place when one's looking for truth. But when you access the truth within, it comes forward as an absolute. That's how it's presented, because within this sort of human aspect, third dimension, whatever word you want to give to it, we're seeking, we're looking to find, we're looking to have that inner wisdom triggered. When we find that stream within that is inner wisdom, it presents as it is, for there is only, from that perspective, one truth. But we are all accessing that inner wisdom and that one truth, and we are interpreting it in the way that makes sense to us, in the way that feels right to us, in the way that resonates with us. So one individual accessing that one truth, that one inner wisdom, may present with different information to another person accessing that same one truth and that inner wisdom. So the way forward is to actually look at the person who's saying something opposite, that seems opposite to you, and say to them, oh, I understand that you're accessing that one truth, that inner wisdom, and you've presented it this way. Your perspective is interesting. It isn't the same as mine. Mine is this. But how about we look at these two perspectives together and see what we can come up with? And that's when we go into the philosophy, the analysis of it. But what's been happening since the beginning of time, as Daniel was saying, is instead of doing that, one is saying to the other person, your inner wisdom, your inner truth is wrong. And that's where there are problems. But then there's another aspect to take into account, and that is that unfortunately there are individuals who think they've accessed inner wisdom, but really they're still in philosophical seeking, and they present their philosophical seeking as an absolute, as absolute truth, when in fact it isn't, because it's very, very peppered with their own philosophy. And we're all in different degrees of doing that. So have we accessed inner truth? Maybe we have. Are we interpreting it with as much removal of our own opinion, our own subjective opinion? Are we able to be completely objective towards that inner wisdom that comes through us? Or are we heavily subjectively putting in our own philosophical opinions into that wisdom? That's what's happening in modern day, in our current spirituality. That's why there are so many arguments. And the issue is when someone is resonating with their own material and don't realize that they're putting in a lot of heavy subjectivity and philosophical opinion into that, they aren't able to recognize someone else who is being objective to their wisdom. Therefore, they will instantly place that person as wrong, dark, misleading others, false. And within all of this, as the seeker, that does go on. Whether it's intentional, and yes, there are those intentionally misleading within the spiritual community, for sure. And there are others who are very well-meaning and loving, who believe their information to be true, but they are inadvertently misleading others as well. And it is up to the individual seeker to look at all these different presentations, be they New Age, be they Eastern philosophy, be they pagan, be they Satanism, you know, whatever label is there. And that's another thing. People will reject certain labels through fear of that word. And Daniel's right. We were having a conversation earlier about this. And we both agreed that someone could actually present. So symbolically, they present as light. They could be wearing a fairy costume with big white wings, with a love heart, above their head, surrounded by crystals and a big smile. But if they are using fear and control and dogma within their teaching or their philosophy, then that's a service to self or negative path. That isn't loving and being truly spiritual or truly religious, whatever word you want to give to that. You could have someone else dressed in a black witch outfit going out on Halloween night, if you will, with great big devil's horns and a skull on one side and you know, a picture of the devil's tail with a big fork in on the other side, walking around with all sorts of scary things. But if they're loving and kind and they are allowing others their own freedom of expression, then they're within a service to others or positive path. So it's not about the symbols or the words used, the labels given. It's all about the intention within and the alignment. And that is something that a lot of people are lost within. And because they don't have that within themselves, or more likely they do have it, but they don't recognize it and they don't trust it. So they're looking for this outside of themselves. And so they get attached to the symbols, the labels, the words used, and they get lost. You can only truly find a teaching outside of you, whether it's another person speaking or whether it's a text or whatever it is, when you are aware of your own ability to access that wisdom and to understand what that resonating aspect is and to trust it. So all of this is going on in contemporary spirituality. It's been going on since the beginning of time or beginning of our known history. We are developing, but we're developing through, if you will, a kind of chaotic system. And that's because there is deliberate infiltration, because there are individuals on this planet who don't want us to develop. They don't want us to wake up. And that's a whole other story. So there's all these different things going on. And the only thing we can do is be in that trust and be in that inner wisdom and allow the outside reality to reflect that, as Becky said earlier.
So Magenta, sorry, just before Daniel talks, I just want to ask you, you know, Chris and I have been doing a monthly spiritual topics and trying to help our members specifically, because we work with the CC members, to explore different topics in their own personal journey towards, you know, spirituality. And one of our big topics, which was really popular, was about intuition and discernment. So how would you help people find their intuition and discernment so that they can improve that to intuitively know what is helpful truth and what is distraction or deceit?
Oh, that's such a wonderful question, Becky. And I've been asked this so many times. And I did ask the 9, and they came up with a very, very simple, that's this, the 9, the white-winged collective consciousness of 9, which is an aspect of myself that is not within the conscious aspect. It's outside of that linear consciousness. Anyway, so I communicate with them, and they gave me a very simple exercise. And really what it is it's getting in touch with the feeling, the emotion of what feels right to you or in alignment with you. Right is not necessarily the best word to use. That exercise is really simple. So if we say, Becky, let's take you and your name, Rebecca, let's say, obviously that's your name. So what I would say to you is, if you were to say, my name is Rebecca, or my name is Becky. So you would say that out loud. So this, anyone can do this exercise, anyone at all. But take the name that you identify with, because if you were born with the name Susan and you changed your name to Janet, then you might need to change the word. Basically, what you're doing here is presenting a truthful statement that you know to be true. My birth name is Rebecca. My birth name is Becky. So when you stand there and you say that, it will feel, it should feel solid to you. It should feel right. You may even have certain visuals in your mind. You may see a white pillar directly in alignment. You may see symmetrical geometry. You may have a little gnome pop up in your mind and go like this. Whatever the inner imagination is, the feeling and the accompanying mind visual will show you that you have just made a truthful statement. So become familiar with that feeling. What does it feel like when you make a truthful statement? What does it feel like when you say, my name is Becky? It's true. Then go ahead and say, my name is Julie. What does that feel like when you've just made a statement that you know is completely false? It's kind of like a bit weird. It feels a bit off. You feel a bit imbalanced. You might see geometry that's all sort of floaty and asymmetrical. You might have a little gnome jump up and go, whatever it is, get familiar with that feeling. What does it feel like to make a statement that you know is false in comparison with making a statement that you know is true? It's very linked to, if you will, kinesiology. It's the same kind of thing, but using words. Don't go any further. Become familiar with that feeling. Some people will get it immediately, and they can start asking the greatest philosophical and metaphysical questions within 5 minutes. Others need time to really feel, because we've been taught in society deliberately to not feel that inner resonance. Once you are familiar and you know what it feels like to make a truthful statement and a statement that's not true, a statement that's false, you can then apply that to anything and everything. It takes time and it takes practice, but you can say things like, is this medication right for me? And feel, is this nutritional meal right for me to eat? Is this film right for me to watch? Is this spiritual text truthful or not? And you learn what that feels like. And over time, and it takes practice just like anything else, it's just like learning a musical instrument takes time and practice. Over time, you will learn to trust your intuition and what you resonate with so much that it becomes second nature. You don't need to think about it, and you are shown truth and you are shown what is false immediately in front of you. That's the way the 9 taught me to teach others a very simple exercise to find what that alignment feels like.
Thank you. Daniel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on something Magenta just mentioned. We were having a conversation this morning, and it was about how people can be so desperate. And I understand this. You get to a certain time in your life and you are seeking deeper answers, more profound kind of ideas, but people can trip up and drive themselves a bit crazy with almost putting conditions on themselves that they should be more advanced than they are, and they desperately seek here, there, and everywhere, and they want to do every course. They get frustrated because they don't know what book to look for. And I was talking to Magenta this morning about when I kind of just floated around. I always considered myself a spiritual person, but I wasn't localized on any particular kind of any particular idea. To me, it was just kind of like just like when you go to the greengrocers, it's all fruit, it's all vegetable, you know, it's all wonderful, it's all good for you. Each thing has different properties to it, which will you know and nourish your body. Certain things might not kind of taste quite right to you or smell a bit weird, but it's all good, you know it's all good for you. So I kind of floated around from my teenage years into my sort of mid-20s, aware of it all. I'd sometimes go into a bookshop and I'd browse and I'd pick up books in the self-help section, the esoteric section. I didn't really buy any of it though. I mean, actually, like, make a purchase, because I just enjoyed, you know, picking a few ideas out. I never really felt drawn that often to actually take somebody's book and read it from cover to cover, but I loved it all. I was fascinated by it all. I used to watch this great show on TV. It was called Sightings, and it was all about paranormal experiences and aliens, and visitations and ghosts, and guys often love all the ghosty stuff. So that was kind of an introduction for me, because the whole ghost and paranormal thing, it simultaneously terrifies you and intrigues you when you're younger. If you can kind of balance that as you get older into something a bit more controlled. But yeah, picking up on what Petra said. Sorry, I call her Petra. It's funny me saying Magenta, Petra. Okay. We were talking about people who they're so overwhelmed by the massive spiritual courses and books out there. They simply don't know where to begin. They don't know where to start. And of course, they want to make the right choice. We all do. If you were learning about nutrition, you'd want to get a great teacher. You'd want to know what is a good company who's producing good organic herbs or whatever. But I was reminded of this lady I met at one of these spiritual meetings years ago. I used to belong to a chat room. This is right when the internet was first picking up. It was an AOL chat room. I don't even know if AOL are going anymore. And it was called Mystic Gardens. And I met so many cool people on it. And once a year, they do an actual meetup in Somerset, and we go camping. So I actually got to meet them in physicality, which was great. And there was this one lady here. And to be honest, she was more authentic. I'm not being horrible. She was more authentic than most people there, and she was saying that she loves all the spiritual stuff, but she doesn't know where to begin. She doesn't know who to listen to, who to read, what to do. And she was such a nice person. And I was trying to gently tell her that, in my opinion, she was way ahead of the game, because she was like open. She was like a sponge, and she'd already done the work, and just being a lovely, respectful, open person with that childlike wonder. To me, she was more authentic than many of the people there who'd been following certain paths for years. But just like we were saying before, they'd got into the dogma. They'd felt that they had achieved a level of spiritual mastery. Maybe they had been, given accolades in their community. And there was a very pagan vibe there, which was wonderful. But a few people there were like, they presented themselves as, grandmaster this, or priest of the wolf that. And it's wonderful. But oftentimes these people, they'd run with it. And I understand it. When people celebrate your work or who you are, you can't help. This is human beings. We get a big head, and you're like, people tell you you're wonderful, and you're like, oh, thank you, that's so much. But over time, if too many people tell you it, after a while, you do actually start to think, yes, I am wonderful. And some people go weird with that, and they feel they become puffed up. And it's like I say, it's not a criticism. I think we can all fall into that over time. It can happen the inverse. If people tell you, you're a loser, or you're, you're not good looking, that can get into your head as well. It can work both ways. And I think as you grow up, hopefully you balance that out somewhere. I just wanted to draw attention to a book which picks up on something Petra was saying, right? Really brief introduction. My kind of enthusiasm about Christianity didn't really come around until about 5-6 years ago. It was always there in the background, because my mum was a Sunday school teacher, but it wasn't really a prominent part of my childhood. I was vaguely aware of it. I'd always see some of her Bible open with notes and stuff, and I'd go, I would just go out of duty every Sunday to Sunday school class. But it was never really prominent. She didn't really force it on me, which was great, to be honest, because I've heard so many people who have turned against Christianity because they were brought up in an environment where it was pushed on them too much, especially Catholicism. I've heard so many people have had bad experience with Catholicism, and then they turn away from it. But it's not because of the source material. It's because of the human beings, the adults who were driving ideas into their head, and then it all went weird. But me, with the Christianity, it was always floating around in my head. And then about 6 years ago, I thought, I want to look at the Bible. I want to just pick up the Bible with no filter, with nobody telling me what it's about, with nobody telling me, oh, it's controlled, it's been altered over the years. you know, religious persecution this and controlling the masses that. I wanted to just approach the Bible like I had just stumbled across it in a cave, this big, you know, ancient scroll, and I'm just going to consider it for myself with no Bible studies, with no, you know, hell and brimstone preachers telling me what it means or doesn't mean. I just wanted to consider it for myself. And I'd done that, and I got a copy of the Catholic Bible because I heard that it had more books. It had about 8 more books in it than the regular Protestant Bible. So I thought, I want to look at it all. And I've since learned there's many nuanced translations of the Bible, because obviously each one wants to bring out different differences in the language in the text. But I literally started at page 1. And I think it's a shame. I only learned this later. A lot of Christians don't really look at the Old Testament that much, which I think is a massive shame. Because to me, it's like jumping into series 5. If you just start with the New Testament, it's like jumping into series 5 of an incredible show, and you haven't got the context of the previous 4 series, getting the background, getting the refinement, getting the characters, getting the plot line going. It's incredible. So I literally started at page 1. Book of Genesis, and I wanted to keep out of my head, I wonder if this is true. I wanted to think, you know, all of these books were written hundreds of years before any of us was here. Who are we to say it's all rubbish? We know more now. You know, modern scholars have disproved this, but just the book of Genesis alone, and this talk of miracles, the Tower of Babel, Adam and Eve, Sodom and Gomorrah, the plagues of Egypt. It's like, whereas these have been floating around in my head as just kind of old dusty tales from, you know, you kind of half hear a bit of a sermon in church when you're younger. It had a new kind of relevance to me. And then I would like take a concept, say I took just like the Garden of Eden, really consider that. Is that just an allegorical tale? Is it just metaphoric? Or is there some truth in it? And I really took the time to just take little bite-sized chunks and just sit quietly, which nobody seems to do anymore. They need to verify everything. They get their phone out. They have to hammer away and find article after article and different people's opinions. And it's just all noise. There's no real kind of alternative to just taking a book and reading it and just sitting with it in your own head and contemplating it. Later on, yeah, go and get some study notes, look what people have said about it. But sometimes you just need to sit with it quietly. And a physical book as well. There's something beautiful about holding a physical book. You can't get distracted when you're holding a physical book. You're not going to get a notification pop up in the corner of something which commands your attention or tells you that, you know, you must see. I mean, there's so every time I go on YouTube now, every video says must see or urgent update or energetic shift. You must see this video. You must see it. It's like if I woke up every morning and it's like, oh, how many must see urgent videos are there today? You just drive yourself crazy. And I think it's just a symptom of the internet age. And I do actually feel bad for like young people who've never known the world where there wasn't an internet, because they're like, well, what did you do? What did you do? What, there were like 4 channels on TV. You'd get like 1 newspaper every morning. What did you do with your time? But I think we're so immersed in it now. When I think about the 1980s and the 90s, I'm actually like, what did I actually do? But I don't remember being bored. I remember being quite content. I met a friend yesterday, and we were talking about this, and I was saying, like I've come across quite a few young people, and it's like if they have to wait for a bus or a train, they actually can't handle it. I'm not waiting 45 minutes for a train. And it's like when I was at college, sometimes that happened. If your lesson ended at an awkward time, 45 minutes to the next train. What did I do? I took time to walk to the station. I'd go and sit by a tree, or I'd just go to the station and I'd sit there. And you know what I did? I just looked at the patterns inside my head. I didn't have a phone to go to. I mean, it's only like, seems like 5 minutes ago Do you remember the time when phones started to first get popular in the 1990s? You'd see somebody with their phone and you would actually think, you dork. They'd get their phone out proudly. Oh, yeah, phone, yeah, you can hear me. Yeah, I'm on the train, yeah. And you just think, wow. And now it's just like, it's weird when you see a person not on a phone at a bus stop or in their spare time, or just like, I've never got a modern phone, and Magenta's been encouraging me to do it, because I do worry that I would get lost, the immersion of it being all encompassing. Saying that though, I this is the irony. I use Petra's phone because I love the camera and I love making silly little sketches. And I do like looking at the Telegram group because it's great for connectivity. If I had one of my own, I actually worry that I wouldn't be able to ration myself. So look, I've got an old school phone. Look, an old school flip phone. And you know what? It's fantastic because, you know, the battery lasts forever. I've seen so many people have a nervous breakdown if their phone is on 46%. This will last for days and days. If we're ever lost in the wilderness, it's my phone which will save us, because the battery lasts forever. And look, I put like a kid, I put a sticker on it. I put Mary on it though. Look, I put a sticker of Mary. Yes. Anyway, I was going to draw reference to a book. I won't go on about too much. I because maybe I can go through these another time. But this relates to something Magenta was just saying about there can be this inclination to want to quantify everything around you and beat yourself up when you haven't got it right, or you haven't got the right resources, or you know, you get discouraged by a spiritual tradition or a teacher. This book, it is actually a what would be considered a fringe work, a mystical Christianity text. This is from like the medieval period. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing, and I believe it's actually by an anonymous author, which wouldn't surprise me because it would have been seen at the time as quite heretical, I imagine. And it's quite transcendental and abstract and mystical. You'd almost think it was kind of like an esoteric Buddhist text, to be honest. And what I took away from this is, I mean, just the title alone, The Cloud of Unknowing, that kind of gives you a vibe straight away about the kind of flavor of work it is. But what I took away from it is you need to have this you need to instill in you almost a freedom to not know, and a freedom to constantly refresh your mind so that other things can come in. It's what we were talking about before, about the way you can have all this great stuff. When dogma comes in, it destroys all the fun and it makes everything less accessible, and it makes people start to feel shame and beat themselves up and accuse others of doing things, what have you, you know, falling into sin and accusing everybody of doing this, that, and the other. And in this work, I want to revisit it because it's so well written and it's so relevant for any time. And it's about just this kind of floating in this space in between, in your head or in your spirit, or what have you, whatever terms you want to use. And it's all about always being open, because there's so many possibilities everywhere. It has stuff about the laws of physics as well. If you can accept that the laws of physics are only in this realm, and it might be different in other realms, or it might have developed over time, it opens your mind up to all other possibilities. Like, people can think about all these miracle stories in the Bible. They're not real. Angels, visitations, how can they be real? But if you can accept that the laws of physics haven't always been set as we understand them now, it can just like lead you into so many different avenues of inquiry in your head. So that is a fantastic work, The Cloud of Unknowing. It's got a real esoteric twist to it, which I think would appeal to many people. And this is the kind of thing, I went to a Bible, I'll wrap up in a minute, I don't want to yak on. I went to a Bible study course a few years ago, and I actually found that some of the books I was referencing and the ideas I was saying, they were just kind of looking at me blankly. It's not they were offended, but it was almost too zany. it was too zany. But the bizarre thing is, all of these mystical Christianity texts were written hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They're not new age. They're not some new contemporary wacky spirituality. But I think it's a shame that that the contemporary spiritual, like modern Christianity, has in some areas, particularly in America, I think it might be a bit more open in the UK. But there's so much emphasis on denominations in the US. They would potentially say, stay away from that work. You know, it's devil inspired. It's weird. It's you know, it's mischievous spirits whispering in your ear. But there is a multitude of ancient Gnostic mystical texts that I don't see as detracting from the Bible. I see it as embellishing it, as complementing it. I do believe the Bible is God inspired, for want of a better word, and that core collection of texts is divine. But there's other stuff available for people who want to explore in different areas. Not everybody's ready for it, and that's cool, but it's there waiting for you if you want to pick it up. So that's I shall now mute myself. I'm sorry if I digress too much.
No, Daniel, that was fantastic. And I'm sorry, I was sort of dipping in. There's so much that you covered there, and Magenta beforehand. And there's lots of different threads that I wanted to pick up on. Let's start with the last bit. What, in my understanding, is that you're talking about that book sort of referring to 0 Point, which is interesting because that's what Chris and I are doing for our final topic for this first year within the spiritual topics. And 0 Point is what Grandmother Mulara talks about being the sacred neutral, which is being able to access that infinite space within you where everything is possible. And to do that, we are accessing different dimensions. We are accessing all that is. And I could go on a lot more about that, but absolutely in that space, you are open to infinite possibilities, absolute creativity, and in a way we have the ability to do that. And when we really can do that and draw that in and actualize it, we can be so creative, and there is so much that we can do as individual human beings, and then helping others within humanity do the same. One of the things earlier that you said, Daniel, was talking about, especially men, and I see that, but I remember, when I lived in a village more than 10 years ago now, and some of the people in the village were just sort of starting to get interested in, ghost stories and ghosts. Someone had a ghost sighting, and there's some old history to do with that, and it frightened and intrigued people. And the thing about learning about ghosts, or let's just stick to ghosts, is that it opens up the possibility to people who only ever believe that what you see is what you get, and 3D, we live in a 3D world, there's nothing beyond that. When people do have a ghost sighting or see something that they cannot rationalize, then they are forced to start exploring the possibility that there is more to life than is physically here in the 3D. And that's how many people start, and you can go down many routes from there. But recognizing, as I think we all do here, there are so many different dimensions imposed on each other. We're multidimensional human beings with a soul that can access different dimensions, but is anchored here in the 3D for this physical life here on 3D Earth. And that is connected to 0 Point, which is connected to, if you're talking about physics, quantum mechanics, that's all included in all of this. And Magenta, something that you were saying, and I can't even remember what it was now, but it was about, when you were talking towards the end of your talk, it reminded me of being grounded. It's so important to being grounded and being able to walk with, how does Grandmother Mulara call it, Chris? walk with
is it happy feet?
not happy feet. Oh, God. It's the we've got a gosh, we should know this. We've heard it enough, but it's walking with it's the sacred thing again, isn't it? And it's about being grounded and being conscious, but keeping yourself open-minded. It's important to have an open mind. Don't close your mind, but have an open mind and stay connected and grounded. So thank you very much, both Magenta and Daniel. I think we have talked about a lot, and we have. Chris, is there anything else that you would like to add?
Oh, I just wanted to touch on two things. I was going to look up that quote from Grandmother Millara because it's awesome. I know we should remember it, but it's in one of our monthly. I think it's in last month's monthly spiritual topic. But I wanted to touch on two things. First, Magenta, thank you so much for sharing that exercise. It's kind of feels like a discernment exercise. So I've personally done kinesiology. It's a hard word to say, and taught that. And, a lot of people use divination tools, but the exercise that you taught, you're right. People can do that anywhere, anytime, and it's very, very powerful. And however you do it, doing those statements, starting with something that you know is true and something that you know isn't true, is a really, really great way to lean into that. And then it does, over time, it does become it's just very natural, as long as, like, for me, it's natural, but then still those little voices come and you have to be like, okay, I already got the answer, right? And so anyway, that's a beautiful exercise. Thank you. And then Daniel, I wanted to touch on, I know Becky touched on a lot of pieces that you talked about, but I absolutely love where you were talking about getting in the space of the freedom to not know. Because I think as humans, it's human nature to want to know what's next and to plan out all of those next steps. And as you are more and more able to let go of that, I think it does bring you closer to that 0 point or the field of possibilities. But it feels like, at least for me, like I've had to learn how to let go of the need to and know and be able to plan everything and understand. Because when you say, okay, I have to know what the next steps are, you're kind of boxing yourself into limited possibilities there. So the freedom to not know, that's very wise. Thank you.
I think that's it exactly. When I found that when I kind of chilled out about where I should be diverting my attention, I would naturally just find a great book, or I'd hear a speaker on TV, and then they would reference something else. So it's once you jump into that flow, you don't necessarily need to set yourself up with a regimented study program of where your next step is going to be. I've actually found in my journey that sometimes I'll come full circle, because it's like I'll have an interest in one thing, and then 8 steps along the way, whether it's books, whether it's documentaries I've watched, I'll then find that they reference the thing I started with. So an example of that would be, just briefly, I've always loved the films of David Lynch because they're really like abstract. He'd done Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet and stuff. And I liked him since I was a teenager. In more recent times, through all my attempts to become really smart and everything by reading all these texts and trying to take the good stuff away from it, I came across the work of a Jewish author called Franz Kafka, who also writes quite abstract short stories with a mystical twist on it. Then later on, I saw, this was quite recently, like a year ago, I saw a documentary and David Lynch was talking about Franz Kafka, and I didn't even know he also read and studied his work. So it came full circle. So I felt like I had kind of been on this fantastic journey, only to find out that right at the start, there was already a clue there. So that just kind of reassured me that I was, dancing to the right rhythm or something. Yeah. Before like I said, I don't want to overwhelm people with all the amazing books. I'm too enthusiastic. I opened my cupboard today and I just found all these books. but there's a massive pile here. I don't want to overwhelm everyone with them, maybe another time. So I'm just going to recommend this one book, because this is the one book I recommend to everyone. I've got such enthusiasm for it. It's called The Sacred History by Jonathan Black, The Sacred History. I believe he goes under the pen name Martin Booth or Mark Booth in America. I'm not sure why he's got a different pen name, different countries, but The Sacred History. And this is an incredible compendium of different mystical experiences that human beings have had since the dawn of recorded history. And he's one of those great authors where he doesn't just tell it to you in a cold kind of school textbook fashion. Oh, this is what the Greeks thought. This is what the ancient, Chinese thought. He's telling you episodes, and then he's encouraging you to just consider, what does this mean? What does this mean for humanity? It's like, he writes so well. It's like a friend just showing you some stuff that they've come across with no kind of like command as in, oh, I'm really smart and I'm going to tell you this. It's like a friend showing you some stuff and holding your hand and just walking with you through time and eon and just saying, what do you think of this? Look at this amazing thing. And it's such a well-written, immersive text. I couldn't put this down. And it's like, often books I'll pick up and I'll read like a third, put it down from, weeks, months. This, I read it from cover to cover. I couldn't wait to get back to it. The only bad thing about this book is I was sad when it ended. He has written a few other books as well, but this is, if anybody is just like confused and overwhelmed, I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to dip my toe in. This book, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not promoting it. It's just like what I found. It's like, I just found it so useful, and it's fun. It's fun. People forget to have fun. You can't think of a sacred text and think, oh, it's work. It's a laborious task. This book is really fun, interesting, and fascinating. And it's like, I don't know if he has worked as a teacher, but if he has, he's the kind of person who would just make you enthusiastic about any topic. He's such a good writer. So that's it. The Sacred History by Jonathan Black. I don't know him. I haven't met him. I'm not promoting it for any other reason than I think it's a fantastic, fantastic resource for people who simply don't know where to begin. And maybe they've just become despondent because they're like, I don't know about the spiritual stuff. So get The Sacred History by Jonathan Black. It's just astonishingly fantastic work. 5 out of 5.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much. Now, Chris and I have managed to find out 2 quotes from Grandmother Malara. One is, walk the spiritual path with practical feet, and the other is, with each step you take, you will learn how to grow your heart with practical feet. So yes, it's a practical feet thing, which is, it's about being grounded, and it's about keeping your feet on the ground, but with an open mind and an open heart. And then, that'll help you with your journey here on earth. And Magenta, any last words from you for this podcast? Because I would love to have you both back again sometime.
Oh, thank you, Becky. I'd love to come back. It's been great fun. Yes, what you said about practical feet, it's making the spiritual path real and allowing reality to be part of that. And the 9 call this the path of the moon is within, the subconscious, the feminine, the masculine, the path of the sun is the reality outside. So that's where you may see signs in books or in films or in objects or in symbols. But earlier, what you said about the cloud of unknowing being 0 point, I absolutely agree. I feel that the author is clearly discussing 0 point, because the 9 have said to me, you cannot access true knowing unless you are in the place of unknowing. You have to not know truly and be aware of the fact that you do not know in order to access knowing. Because if you feel that you know, then that's when you can go into ego and close down other possibilities. But as I was saying earlier, when you find the knowing, it comes forward as an absolute. So you then present that you know. So it's a not knowing and a knowing. It's a complete not knowing and a complete knowing simultaneously. And when you're there, that is 0 point. But it's interesting, all the books that Daniel's been reading, the fact that he's read the Bible, in the same time as my path being bringing forward information from the nine, there's been many times when I've just gone away and I've been communicating with the nine, or I've been drawing forward information, or I've just written, brought forward the transmission for a book or a video. And one concept will be new to me, and I'll be interested, and I'll come downstairs, and because I've got my office upstairs and he's got his little office downstairs. So I'll come down and say to Daniel, in your travels amongst all these books that you've read, have you ever come across any kind of philosophy or belief system that says blah, blah, blah? Because I've never heard it anywhere else. I've never come across it anywhere else. It's come from the nine. Then Daniel will say, well, actually, yes, that does remind me of, and he'll point to wherever he feels that he's heard of that philosophy, and we'll discuss it. So it's very interesting that there is a parallel there. Also, the nine use many biblical references in the transmissions. They've spoken about the 12 tribes of Israel, which is in one of my books, and the new book that's coming out, they discuss the parting of the Red Sea, and there are many other biblical references. And so the way the nine present this is that the biblical references are visual codes, visual triggers or catalysts into our own awakening. They're metaphor to present multiple ways of thinking using that metaphor, and also to describe us as a soul, as in the 12 tribes of Israel being the self, the matrix, with Israel being the matrix. I could go on and on, but when I come to speak to Daniel, that he will say, yet this could be literal, this could have had a literal meaning also. And we'll have the discussions about that and look at whether that was where is there infiltration here? Is there misdirection? Is Israel deliberately presented as a country when really it is the soul, the matrix of an individual or of a structure of a planet? Or is there something in the actual country of Israel that mirrors that matrix? So we have these interesting conversations with the books that Daniel's read and the information from the nine. And then when I think we discussed this with you when we talked to you a couple of weeks ago, when we were hand fasted in 2019, we wanted to bring forward our own meaningful deity or beloved spiritual presentation. I didn't want to make it too much like my work and bring in the nine, but I wanted to have that was meaningful to me, that's within what I see as the nine, the beloved Lady Sophia, Queen Sophia, Archangel Michael, Archangel Merlin. So I wanted to bring their energies into the script, the actual service, the words of the ceremony, which I wrote with assistance from Daniel, and presented that to our the lady who read the whole service for us, our celebrant. She read everything, and we brought in Daniel's spiritual focus and beloved, Jesus Christ. And so what I'm saying here is, we don't see ourselves as, oh, I'm New Age and Daniel's Christian. We don't see that black and white label. We see us as both the same. We're both the same, but I'm presenting my spirituality this way, using these words and these symbols. Daniel is presenting it in his way, and we wanted to come together in ceremony, in meaningful ceremony, and hand fasting, and unifying together and making those vows and commitments together, the true marriage, which does not have to be legal, I might add. It can be a non-legal ceremony. I know you did the same thing, Becky, had a hand fasting and then a legal ceremony as well. we did the same thing. But what we wanted to do was bring in our own focus. So on our table at the altar, we'd have I had a white dragon and a picture of Jesus Christ. So we had these different, and we wanted to show our close family and friends. And it's not really about choosing a bit of New Age and a bit of Christianity and melding it together. It's about merging the different aspects that we saw as sacred and meaningful to us. And it just, it moved on its own. It took on a life of its own, that merging, because it's all one and the same thing, as we were saying right at the beginning of this talk. It's all just different aspects of one and the same thing. So I hope in this chat today, we have got across to anyone who might be confused about where they need to place themselves, where is their tribe, you know, what label do they take, what is it that expresses them. It is unique, and each individual will have a unique expression, and they create that themselves, just as they create a recipe, just as they put together an outfit, just as they create a painting. It's unique. So I hope we've managed to express that in this chat today.
Magenta, that's so beautiful. I'm completely with you with how you express that. And I also wanted to say as well, like Daniel, I've read the Bible several times throughout my earlier life, and I always started with the First Testament as well. And I think I approached it very similarly to Daniel. Interestingly, I found the stories, they felt very real to me, but they also felt very magical and mystical, and like they had meaning. So, and it's interesting as well how the figure 12 comes up again and again and again. And I think there's a lot we could talk about, the symbology behind 12, you know, rather than 10, because we've moved into a decimal way of thinking, but 12 is a much more profound number to humanity, I think. And also within the Bible, there's the Revelations, the book of Revelations. And I do feel that we could be within those times, and that's something that we could talk about, perhaps, if that's, whether, you know, you think that that's the case or whether it's not the case, or what the similarities are. How could that possibly be something that was written a couple of thousand years ago? How can they be talking about now? So there's a lot to be explored there. Chris, any final words?
I'd just like to thank Magenta and Daniel for joining us. I think this has been a wonderful conversation. And I agree, we could talk about so many other things, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to do so. So thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who's watching this video.